Hello everybody, I hope you're all having an amazing day. We have another lesson for you guys here, and today I felt I should finally bite the bullet and cover the hardest forced checkmates in chess. Now, what's a forced checkmate? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but some checkmates in the games are forced, some are not. For example, a knight versus a pawn is a possible checkmate, but it is not forced. But something like two bishops versus a king is forced. Now, we have three. They start easy and get harder. So this is the easiest one we're going to see. And it's two bishops versus a king. Now, it's important to note as well, these bishops are opposite colours. It's the only way this works. They do not work with the same coloured bishop. Say if you promote a pawn to get a bishop, for some reason, I'm not sure why you would do that, make sure to choose the right colour square if you have the chance. So, how do you go about doing this? So there is, like I did a video on the drills on chess.com. There is an endgames feature as well on chess.com, which is absolutely amazing to practice these out. And definitely give that a go if you're interested. I'd say like past, like at 1600 past upwards, you definitely do need to know all of these. If you're below 1600, do it anyway. You know, it's only going to help you. It's only going to help you get better at planning, get better at coordinating your pieces as well. But it's not necessary. Just do it for fun if you want to. If not, don't. But yeah, we're starting off with the two bishops here. So this is from the chess.com endgames. It's just set up a nice position for you. And I'm just showing you the basic mating. So a lot of these are going to be when you get the king to the edge of the board. And deliver a checkmate. And you see the king's blocked off the king here, and this light squared bishop's blocked off this c8 square. So you might be able to see this straight away. It's just two checks. It's a mate in two. See if you can find it. You just go ahead and check. The king's only move is to go into the corner, and you go ahead and check with the light squared bishop now as well. This is super easy. The hard bit is getting this position. That's going to be the hard bit for most of these, actually. You know, a lot of these are just a sequence of checks and all that to actually get the checkmate. But the hard bit is getting to the position where you can get the checkmate. So this is quote unquote pretty easy, right? I'm hoping you can all see it's just a couple checks. So how do we get to this position in the first place? I've just set up a little example here, and you can see here I'm playing against a 3200 maximum level bot. So that's showing you hopefully how forced this is. You know, this is someone, this is a robot, what, 2000 rated higher than me, maybe a bit less, 2500, I don't know, maths, there you are. And it's just showing you that it is forced. And all it is just coordinating the bishops, really. You get the king involved, but that's mostly just to support the bishops. So we're going to go ahead and play bishop's g2, and you'll see a lot of the time the bots move away. A person's more likely to try stay in the center, more likely to try cause problems with your pieces, but the bots for some reason move away. I'm not sure why, but I'll continue anyway. We're going to go to f1, and you can see here these bishops are working together really well to make almost an impenetrable wall that this king can never physically cross over. And you'll see on this side, when it's only one bishop, there are a ton of holes that the king can cross over into. So what we're going to do, we're going to make sure we have both bishops pointing at the same diagonal. So we're going to go to e2, and the bishops are next to each other. So you have this impenetrable wall on both sides of the board. Very nice. And what we're going to do, basically, we're just going to slowly move this wall upwards, crisscrossing, box the king onto the back rank. That's the game plan. Now, a bit harder to do it than to say it, but you see here the king has come back forward, so we can't actually move any of these bishops without them being taken. So we just move the king up. Now it's tempting to go to e3 here and start moving the wall up, but you see if we move to e3, we're creating a hole on e4. Now I'll show you that in a second when we do move it up. Just make sure I'm doing it right. There. Yeah, cool. So you see here we moved the bishop up to d3. And we can highlight the walls again. These impenetrable walls we're making, moving up. And you see now we have a hole on d4 that the king could potentially get into. Now I'll show you how to bypass that in a second. But before, again, you'll see we don't have that hole in this situation. So it's only when you move the bishops up and they're above each other that you create this hole. So that's why you need the king there in order to support this forwards bishop. But they didn't go any closer, and we're just going to move this wall up. Keep going. Keep moving the wall up. Keep moving the king with the bishops. Now the king has got closer again. So we sort of just need to lose a move here. So we're just going to move the bishop back to d2. Now the reason we've gone to d2 rather than f2 is because the king's on this side of the board. So we need to keep the bishop on this diagonal here in order to keep the integrity of the wall. The king's gone this way. So we're going to put the bishop on f4. And the king could potentially go to c5 here. But that's more where the king is. So I'm not particularly worried about the wall in that situation. But you see here the bishops are still working together to create a wall. It's not the same wall that we talked about, but it is still stopping the king getting any closer. So you see here we highlight all the things we're covering. The king has to basically go back, which it did. And now we'll rebuild our impenetrable wall. Keep moving the king up. Keep building the wall. And you see here, things are getting hard for black. You know, we've gone from the bishop's on the second rank here. And now they've moved up significantly. So we're loving life here. We're going to keep building the wall. Keep going upwards. Yeah, we can move up here. The bishop's gonna, the king's gonna come down, but we're gonna keep building the wall. Keep everything solid. And you see here that the kings move up. So if we go e6 now, without the king, this bishop could just be taken. But luckily, we've got the king up to support this bishop now. And we've achieved our objective. The king's on the back rank. Our bishops are absolutely entombing this king. There's nothing they can do. And it's important to note here that the bishops work really well together to trap this king because it has two squares to choose from. So it's never going to be a stalemate. Unless you're going for the checkmate in the corner, like we've seen, it's never actually going to be a stalemate. So now all we have to do is get the king into the corner of the board. Again, easier said than done. We're going to move the king up. And you see this king's at the edge of the board here. So again, we need to lose a move, but we need to keep both of these bishops on this diagonal. Which one are we going to move is the question. I think we move this dark squared bishop. Again, this wall's still here. And now the point of losing a move is that we can go to g7 and cut off this square for the king. Very, very nice. So the king can no longer physically go there. Even if it goes back to e8, it can't escape ever. We're covering these. And we're just making this wall and putting a corner on there, basically. So the king is forced into the corner again. We are going to now play bishop to f7, I believe. And just move the king over. Continue moving the wall. Again, you see here the king's forced over. Its only legal move is to c8. So we're going to do that. And now we're going to bring this king over. And keep moving the wall. Keep moving the wall. I've said it so many times. Get it in your head. Keep moving the wall. And again, we'll highlight the wall here. The king could potentially go back here, which is an interesting move. But then we would move this bishop to f6. And again, keep moving the wall. And then it would be forced to c8 anyway. In fact, we can highlight that. There we go. The king's gone to d8. We move the bishop to f6. Again, keeping this wall solid. The king's forced to c8. And now we can just keep moving the wall. Again, I'll keep saying it because it's so true. We keep moving the wall. And the king's gone closer to the corner. And we just finalize this wall here. The king's got these two squares. Now, this is very different to what we saw first time. It's a very similar position. But the king's on a8 here. The problem is if we go with this ladder and we move this dark squared bishop first it's actually going to be a stalemate. There's no place the king can go, and it's not in check. So we have to be careful. Again, we just have to lose a move. We have to lose a move. We're just going to move it backwards. And now we have the exact same position. The bishops are slightly different. But we can just go check. Again, the king's boxed in completely. And we just need one more check. Checkmate. So, it takes some doing. It takes some thinking. Even I had to think about it for a second there. But all we're doing, continuously building this wall, continuously shuffling it, boxing off the king. Once you get the habit of this, it's super, super easy. You don't even have to really think about it. I still would think about it because it's scary. And, you know, in chess, we have the 50 move rule. If you don't know what the 50 move rule is, basically, if a piece isn't taken, captured, or a pawn isn't moved or captured, the position's going to be drawn after 50 moves. That's the rule. You have 50 moves to make one of these checkmates. You can see there's no pawns on the board. You can see a piece can't be captured, so you have 50 moves. Those are the rules. Unfortunately, those are the rules. Stops games going on for hours and hours and hours. Just doing one of these checkmates, if someone can't do it, you know, they're not going to give up. They're going to sit there for hours and hours and hours. But you have 50 moves, so you've got to be efficient with all of these. And you can't mess about. You've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to keep building this wall. And remember not to stalemate as well. I think that's the other important thing to know. You shouldn't be stalemating this. It's tempting to pre-move this ladder checkmate, but if you're not careful, it will be a stalemate. So just remember, gain a tempo, push the king back, do it with check. So much better, so much easier, and you're actually going to win the game. Anyway, I think this one's relatively simple. I think even 1400s should be able to do this. Give it a go on chess.com. The end game section, you can practice all of these. And they go from just delivering the final checks to actually starting in a position like this, where your pieces are uncoordinated, and you've got to set it up yourself and go all the way through. So I think just give it a go. You know, even if you're not able to do it immediately, keep trying at it, keep going. You will get there eventually, trust me. Anyway, on to the next one. So the next checkmating pattern we have, it's the infamous bishop versus knight checkmate. Everybody hates this. Everybody loves this at the same time as well. It's so complicated. It's just beautiful, really. It's the epitome of coordination. And positional understanding, I think. So let's jump right into it. I'll see if I can explain it at all. I think I said I actually managed to do this in a game, which is so stressful, especially because it wasn't forced. My opponent basically had the choice of letting me promote a pawn eventually, or sacking their piece for my pawn. And getting me into a bishop versus knight checkmating pattern, and just gambling that I didn't know it. Luckily I did, and I was confident enough to go for it. He offered me a draw, I declined, played on, I managed to do it. So that's something your opponents might do, you know, especially if you're a lower rated person. They might say, oh, there's no way they know this, let's do this and I'll offer a draw. And that's a reasonable decision. I think it's a reasonable decision for you to accept as well. Especially if you don't know it, but give it a go, you know. It's important to note that these, even if you lose on time, this is still going to be a draw, because black has insufficient material to actually win the game. It would be considered a draw. So there's no harm in trying in a game, but you know, if you don't, you don't know it, then fair enough. But basically the most challenging factor about this is the 50 move rule. Especially when you're trying to get the king into the corner with uncoordinated pieces, it might take a while. And actually, I think I was 3 moves off 50 move rule in my game, which is very, very lucky. But yeah, let's go for it. So, like we did with the 2 bishops, we're starting off in the correct position. So, it's important to know what square bishop you have in this. You need to get the king to the same corner as your squared bishop in order to deliver that final checkmate like we saw with the two bishops. Luckily, if the king goes to the other corner, there is a sequence of moves you can force the king over into this corner, which is great for us. So this sequence of moves, it's got a slight pattern to it, but other than that, I'm afraid you just have to memorize it, really. But once you do memorize it, the rest of it is easy. It's just coordination and positional play, I guess, just blocking off the king. But let's start with this pattern, let's say. So what we're going to do, we need the king out this corner. It's a dark squared corner. The only way we can do that is with the knight. I'll say as well, remember this pattern with the king, the knight, and the bishop. I don't think it has to be exactly this. It can be different. Like this knight could be on this side. The bishop could be like here. But just know this is about the formation you want. Just so you can deliver this check. Now this, with the knight, king, and bishop, is what you're looking for, basically. So the knight is basically going to come zoom, 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 in like a zigzag. And your king's only moving on this side. The bishop's going to go all over the board. But this is like the sort of pattern you're looking for. With the king in between the knight and the knight jumping over the king. That's what you want. So the king is on G8. What we want to do is stop their access to G8. We've stopped their access to H8 at the minute. But it can still shuffle between these. So what we want to do, we want to get this bishop on H7 to stop them going to G8. How do we do this? We're going to waste a move. Like we saw with the two bishops, we want to waste a move. You can go to G6 here and just waste a move. It's all good. So now we've wasted a move. The king's gone to F8. We've got to be careful not to let the king out too much. But for now, we just want to stop their access to G8. We're just going to go bishop H7. Perfect. Now the king's gone to E8. There is a risk of letting the king out. So if you go too early with your king, they could go back and go to G7 potentially. They can't actually get out here because the knight's covering E8. But generally what you want to know is that the knight goes first and then the king follows. So we're going to do our zigzag pattern with the knight. Go to E5 here. And you'll see now we're adding another blocker onto this row, really. And that's what the knight and king are going to be doing. The bishop's going to be mostly the one limiting the escape squares. And the knight and king are going to be forming a blockade all the way to the end. So the king's gone over now. And what we're going to do, just follow with the king. Now, there is no way we can stop their escape to C7. That's super important. Don't be scared. We can get the king back to the edge very, very tidily. The king could potentially go to F8. And I believe here the move is just knight D7. And you have a much nicer position. A much, much nicer position. You keep moving the king. And the king goes back. You have this very nice move of bishop G6. But this is the easier way of doing it. We're going to ignore that and say the king's following over because that's the critical line. You need to know we're going to move the king over. And we're going to let the king essentially escape to C7. Now, this is very important to know as well. The order of doing this. Now, I believe we play knight D7 first. Yeah, we play knight D7 first. What is knight D7 doing? So the king can escape. Firstly, let's say the king can escape to all of these squares. What knight D7 is doing, it's limiting some of these squares the king can go to, which is brilliant. And that means as well, we are left with only light squares that the king can escape to now, which is good for us because we have a light squared bishop. So now the king's gone to B7. Firstly, let's say the king goes to A7. That's where we want it. That is 100% where we want the king. It's on the edge of the board. It's very close to A8. And especially if the bishop's on D3, which is where it's going, it can't go to A6. So we want that. Again, we're going to bring the bishop to D3. It can't go to A6. So it's blocked off. If it goes back, we're just happy. If it goes to A8, we're just happy. Okay? So it's going to go to C6. Now, again, it's important to know that you have to lose another move here. Like, if you move this bishop off this diagonal, you're going to let it go to b5. If you move the knight, it's going to go to like b6, c5. We don't want that. If you move the king, it's not in the right position, and you're going to lose control of d5 as well. So what we're doing, we're just sticking the bishop still on this diagonal, and we're wasting a turn, basically. Now, the king could potentially go back to b7. I believe then we move king d6, but most likely you're going to see a king c7. At that point, now we move the bishop to f3, and you can see why now we've let the king get to c7, because there physically is no way to escape now. You see, the knight's covering these dark squares, and the bishop's covering these light squares as well. So the king's actually forced back to the 8th rank. So it's important to know the sequence. This is the sequence that trips people up. Just staying calm, knowing that the king's not actually able to escape, and just chilling, basically. Just chilling. So I believe here the move is just king d6. Because the bishop's covering this, because the knight's covering this, all we need to do is cover the c7 square. So we'll move the king over, and the king's going to go back. Here, again, we want to block off this e square. How do we do that? We've got a light squared bishop. Let's move back to h5. So the king's moved over. It's only legal move. You know, the bishop's covering these, king's covering these. Everything's good. King's gone over. Again, we go back to our zigzag pattern. We move the knight first. King's gone over. Now, the king can go this way, but again, you are just happy because it's closer to there. In fact, I'll see if I remember it. I believe you just go king c6. King c6. And then you go knight b7. Stopping this d8 square. And now you're very happy indeed. You go to b8, b6. With the bishop to g4 and bishop g4, again, the knight's covering d8, king's covering these, the bishop's just checking on this diagonal, and you've got the position you want. So, the king goes back to d8. What we're going to do here is go knight to b7. So the king can no longer go this way. Is it knight b7? Yeah, knight b7. So the king can't go this way. We're going to move the king over. And again, we have this position that we want. Are there any other critical lines? No, I think that's it. Yeah. So what you're looking for generally is a bishop on this diagonal here. And a knight on this b7 square. So you've got this like 5 away pattern from each other with the king 1 above. It's almost like the kings and knight move away from the bishop on this diagonal. That's sort of what you're looking for. And again, we're just boxing out the king. You know, it can't get to e8. We move the knight, then we move the king like we said. The knight's covering the d8 square. Where's the king going? Back to b8. Move the king again, because we know that if the king goes to c8, the knight's still covering d8. And we get this diagonal covered by the bishop. And we get the king in the corner. You know, now we have this beautiful position that we want. The king's in the corner. Now, this is where it gets tricky, and you need to remember the sequence here. We want this knight on a6. How do we get this knight on a6? We have to go to c5. And again, you've got to be careful. If you go a6 straight away, like with the 2 bishops, this is just going to be checkmate. So we need to waste a move. How do we do that? We want the bishop still covering this c8 square, so we need to stay on this diagonal. Go wherever you want. We'll go there. Then you can go ahead with a6. And you see there, everywhere's covered. The king's covered. The knight's covering this square. The king only has a8 left. And, you know, checkmate. Checkmate. Perfect game. It's complicated. It's complicated. I'm not going to lie and say it's not complicated. It gets easier, especially around this part. You know, all you have to do is remain calm. Remember to waste a move here. You know, it's tempting to deliver the check straight away in this position. Especially if you're a bit unsure of what you're doing. It's tempting to go e4 straight away, but then you're letting go of this diagonal. Just waste a move. You know, I think the skill in the knight versus bishop Checkmate is learning when to waste a move. And learning what square to go to waste a move, what diagonal to stay on. And you'll get there eventually. You know, you just got to play it enough. You've got to be confident in yourself. You've got to remember that they don't escape. You know, you have a way of keeping them on the back rank, and eventually you'll get this with enough practice. Again, go on the chess.com practice end games and just do it. You know, try lower level bots that won't make the critical moves. Try higher level bots that will make the critical moves. You know, just play it. Eventually you will get there. So the question stands now: how do you get the king to the edge of the board? I will try my best with this. It's hard, but hopefully we will be able to do it. So unlike with the two bishops, our king is actually the most active piece in getting the other king to the edge of the board. So we'll stay active with that. We'll get our king and our pieces close together. We'll stay in opposition. And all we're trying to do is just limit the available squares for the black king. That's all we're trying to do. Whenever the king goes back, we'll move the king up. We'll move our pieces closer together. We'll make sure everything is covered. And hopefully it will work out well for us. Hopefully it will work out well for us. And you see, again, with the bots, you might want to try this against a real player, because a real player is more likely to make annoying moves. Like king f6 here is pretty annoying. But the bots could potentially just go back to the side of the board. And what you'll find as well with actually playing this out against people and bots is that it won't always be on the back rank. So if you've memorized this pattern on the back rank, you might have a hard time rotating that pattern in your mind and trying to come up with the right moves if it's like on the side of the board or if it's on your side as well. You'll see here, I believe we have what we want in this position. The king's on the side of the board. Our pieces are doing well, and I think this is actually the right sequence of moves here. There we go. So we have the position where the bishop's blocking off this square here. So it's on the side of the board. We practiced it on the top of the board. Let's see if we can translate it in our mind. We'll move the knight first. We'll move the king across. The king's not escaping because we have knight g4. We're going to control this diagonal. The king's gone up. We're going to waste a move. Then we're going to cut it off. Perfect. Now we're going to move the king over, because if it goes back, we're covering this diagonal with the bishop and the knight. Then we're going to move the knight over. Then what are we going to do? We are going to move the king over, I believe. King h4. No. We're going to waste a move with the bishop. That's it. We're going to get the bishop to g6. Then we're going to move the knight over. And you see, this is the pattern I was talking about, where the bishop and the knight are almost a knight's move apart. And this is a good sort of... I use this as an anchor, almost, to know that I'm in the right sequence. If I can get this position on the board, I know I'm doing well. The king's come over. Again, we're going to keep moving the king because we cover this diagonal with the bishop. And here we have the pattern. We want to get the knight to f1 to deliver the check. How do we do that? Bosh. We've got to waste a move, otherwise it's stalemate. There we go. Check. Checkmate. Whew, that's stressful just practicing that with you. But there, we did it pretty efficiently. 31 moves, not bad at all. The computer did make it a bit easy for us, going to the side of the board very quickly. A human's going to be way more annoying, and try and make the annoying moves. That try discoordinate your pieces, however they manage that. But if you can get them to the edge of the board, you see, once you know the pattern, it's pretty easy. Like, how many moves actually is the pattern? Let's say. Where are we? How many moves is the pattern? So we'll say the pattern starts here. 12 moves. 12, all the way up to 31. What's that? 8, 18, 19 moves. You know, not too many. Not too many. You know, I mean, it is 19 moves, but they all make sense, I think. Like, you move the knight, then you move the king. You move the bishop to cut off the light squares. It sort of plays itself, really. Anyway, just practice it. Give it a go. Mess it up. Learn from your mistakes. Keep trying again. Play against people. Play on the side of the board. Play on the bottom of the board. Play on the top of the board. Learn the pattern, like, in and out, back of your hand. You'll get there. Eventually you will get there. And hopefully one day you'll be able to prove it in a game. And I guarantee you it's the most rewarding feeling knowing that your hard work has paid off. Being able to get this actually in a game. But anyway, on to the last one. So the last checkmating pattern. Here we have the queen versus rook. Now, personally, for me, this is the hardest. This is way harder than the knight versus bishop. Simply because I'm not a big fan of queens. I feel like there's just so many moves to calculate, so many checks to calculate. It fries my brain. And for the most part here, it's not actually going to be a checkmate. Now, it is a bit misleading calling it a checkmate. But basically what you're doing is winning the rook. It's a fancy way of winning the rook. And I'm calling it a checkmate because you're getting the king to the side of the board. And after you win the rook, checkmate will be 2 moves away. Something like that. So, how do you do this? Again, this is the position you want. And we're starting in this position because it's hard. It's actually very hard to get the king into this position. I was trying this against a max level bot. And I couldn't do it. I'm not going to lie to you, I couldn't do this against a max level bot. Like the rest of them, like with the knight versus bishop, knight and bishop, and the 2 bishops, it's almost forced to get it to the side of the board. This is very, very hard. There are so many tricks black can do. And a lot of the time, like if someone offered me a rook versus queen in an endgame and then offered me a draw, I would heavily consider the draw, to be honest. There are just so many ways you can mess this up. Anyway, if you manage to get to this position, luckily it's pretty simple to win. Now, this wins if it's white's move or black's move. Ideally, this would be black's move. But there is a way to win this as white's move. And basically what you're doing is forcing black to triangulate. If you watched my king and pawn video, you know a bit about triangulation. You're trying to flip whose turn it is, basically. You're trying to get this exact same position, but as black. So there is a way to do that. It starts off with queen e8. Now, the only legal move here is king h7. And you're just going to go down to e4 here. If the king goes to h8, we'll check on h4. Not there. That loses the queen. We will check on h4. And now it's black. Oh, not that one either. Not that one either. It's the exact same position, but now it's black's turn. So we've triangulated that way. If they go back to g8 here, this is where you've got to do a bit more work. You check on d5. And the reason you check on d5 is that if they go to f8, that's going to be checkmate with d8. So they go back. If they go to h7, it's the exact same thing. Either way, you check on h1. There are no legal moves. You have to go to g8. At which point queen h5 is the exact same position. So you've learned how to triangulate this and get it into black's move. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So you'll see here, black doesn't have many moves. Black does not have any many moves at all. Have I done king f8? I have. Yeah, perfect. So you can move the king and you can move the rook. You can move the king one square. We'll quickly have a look at king there. It's simply just queen h6 wins the rook. The rook's pinned and the king can attack it. Wherever you go, you're just going to take the rook. Perfect. Oh, let's have a look at where the rook can go. So the rook could potentially go to h7, but then that's just going to be checkmate. Very nice. It can't go to f7. It can't go to e7. if it goes to d7, you've got a nice little fork here. Very simple. It can go to c7, it can go to b7, it can go to a7. And let's have a look at this g file. It can't go there, it can't go there, it can't go there. So it can go there, there, and there. So basically you have these three, and they're almost the exact same, basically, because it's like a symmetrical position. The king goes to h7, the king goes to g8. It's symmetrical. So we've seen king f8. Have we seen rook h7? Is potentially an option. That's just mate. Perfect. We've seen king there. Rook d7. We've seen, there we go, rook b7. We'll see rook c7 actually first. Rook c7's probably the critical line. By critical, I mean the most complicated. It's still winning. You're going to go to queen e8 first. Queen e8 is basically just getting the king to h7. Stopping the rook from blocking any checks, I guess. King h7, only move. And then we're just going to go to e4. Now you could go to h8. I think either way it's the same. G8. You're going to g2. Now the reason you go to g2 is that if the king goes to f8, you have a mate on a8 with like a back rank. So the king's going to go back up. At which point, queen h2 and you've forked the rook, basically. And that's sort of the same if they go back to h8 as well. You're going to do these sorts of zigzags and get the fork this way. So it's pretty simple, but this is the most complicated line. So let's have a look at rook b7 then. Queen d5, pretty simple fork here. And then rook a7, a bit more complicated. You're going to go with d5 again. Again, if they go to f8, that's just checkmate. King h7. Again, king h8 is the exact same. You're going to go for the same checks. Queen h1. Queen g1 is a nasty fork as well. So you're just winning the rook that way. So that covers all of the squares on the 7th rank. Let's have a look at these vertical ones. Let's have a look at g3 as well. Again, this is like the same as c7, but on the g file. So we're just going to go queen e8 again, king h7, check. Now if the king goes back to h8, you're going to check on h4. If it goes to g8, you've got to go c4. Again, threatening the mate if they go to f8. King h7, then you get the h4 check, and you just win the rook. Pretty simple stuff. It's just checking. Threatening mate, I think, is the big one as well. Not too complicated. Let's go to g2. Again, pretty simple. d5. It's the exact same as if they go to b7. You know, they sort of correspond with each other. It's pretty nice. And then let's quickly have a look at g1 as well. We're going to go to e8 again. King h7. Queen e4 is almost repeating the exact same moves. Just maneuvering the king until you manage to get some sort of fork. Here it's going to be on a7. So this is almost the flipped version of if the rook went to a7 as well. You're just looking for these checks, going to h8, then checking and forking. It's pretty simple. So yeah, that's how you win this when you get to this position. Again, the trick is getting it to this position. It's mainly just forks. Threats of checkmate as well are a big one. Other than that, it's just maneuvering and just forking. I think the most important thing to note here is actually knowing the triangulation sequence in order to flip whose turn it is in this position. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway you can have. So I said the hardest part is getting to this position. Let's have a look at one way white can mess this up. This is one of the reasons why I could never actually beat the 3200 bot, because this is surprisingly easy to fall into as white. So, it's black's turn here. If it was white's turn, white would be happy. They're still winning. But it's black's turn here. And the problem is, you should know this sort of pattern with the queen right next to the king is asking for a stalemate, basically. And that's the whole point. White can just go to ace. Black can go rook a7. Absolutely amazing move. If the king takes, that's a stalemate. Very unfortunate indeed. So the king's going to try to escape. There's no reason why they should take it. Just keep checking. You know, the king can sort of shuffle a bit. King can sort of shuffle a bit. If they go to, yeah, we'll continue with king a5. Again, it's just going to be a series of sort of infinite checks, basically. Not there. It's going to be a series of infinite checks. You can try as much as you want. If you try to get out this way, you have this very nasty move, basically. If you try thinking, oh, you can't check me on c7 because I'll just take. So I'm safe. You have rook b6, which is absolutely beautiful. One of the nicest moves I've seen in a while. Again, forcing the stalemate. And if you ignore it, I'm going to go ahead and take your queen, which is going to be a forced draw. So you keep checking. And say you try to escape over this side of the board. Keep checking. All of a sudden, you've walked into a very nasty pin. The queen can't legally move. So you just take, and then that's a forced draw. So this is a very, very, very nasty position to be in. And there's nothing white can do about it. This is literally just forced. And it's one of the main reasons what makes this one so hard. So, I'll try show you guys the technique here on how to do it. I've had to turn the bot down a bit. This is a 2000 rated bot. So hopefully they make a few mistakes and make it a bit easier for me. I've said before, I can't do this against a max level bot. It's extremely, extremely hard. So what we want to do, we want to try get the king close to the king. But the problem is the closer we get, the more checks black has. And another thing is that a good player will try to keep the rook next to the king however they can to try block checks, basically. To try block as many checks as they can. What I found tricky about the max level bot was that the max level bot was so happy putting the rook on the other side of the board. Now, a normal player would be terrified of long range forks and all that, but the max level bot does not care. It's calculated at all. It knows that it's fine. And the problem with it being on the other side of the board is that it's completely blocking the king off from getting any closer, which is another reason why it's so hard. So what you'd find with humans is that they'll keep their rook closer. Max level bots, they will do it on the other side of the board, and they just live with that, which is insane, basically. So let's try get the king closer. We'll try cut off the king a bit. And again, the bots, they love throwing it on the other side of the board. We'll get the queen closer. We'll keep getting the queen closer. And you see the king's running now because it's scared. The max level bot will probably do something like rook e8 or throw in some checks or something. The kings tend to run to the other side of the board, like if they're scared, like we've completely cut off the king here. And you see there, so our king can't actually get in here. So this is a bit annoying. So we're going to hit this rook and keep going. This is what we want. I think this is good. Our king's now allowed to pass this e-file. I think here we throw in a check. And now the king's completely on the other side of the board, which is great for us. And here we just win the rook. See, this is potentially why it's easy against humans and lower rated people. But when you get to the top level, this is extremely, extremely hard. This is just a pin. And black can't do anything about it. The only way to cover the rook straight away is to go king g3, at which point a king e3 is just fine. So we've won the rook here, and now it's a pretty standard king versus queen checkmate, I guess. Pretty easy stuff. Definitely not. In fact, you know what we'll do? We'll add, we'll put it on 3200 just to show you how hard it is. Just to show you how quickly I actually messed this up. We're more likely to go into, I think, a 50 move rule than anything here. So we'll try our best. The rook's blocked off our king, and if you ever play this as black as well with the rook, you'll be able to learn a good few things from actually just watching these bots play. So we're just trying to cut the king off a bit here. Perfect. And you'll see here, the max level bot's happy to move the rook away. Because they know there are no forks, it makes things very, very hard. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that there's no forks here, but you just can't force it. And the problem is if we try get the king closer, they have these behind checks, which are very, very annoying. So I'm gonna... I don't think it's actually correct to be throwing in so many checks as white. I think that's actually a mistake. I think the strategy is more to block off the king and put black into almost like a zugzwang. And I want to... Yeah, it's super, super hard. Now they're going to get the checks in, which is really annoying. So I'm going to have to move this king over. And I'm not moving it onto the third because I don't want to get skewered. And they're just so solid. Like, there's no forks here, which is ridiculous to me. And I'm trying my best to create some forks, but it just is not happening. I'm trying to... Oh, that's a sneaky trap. It's so tricky. They're going to keep checking us. I want to move my king over, but they're just not letting me. Yeah, I mean, you can see how much I'm struggling with this. It's insane. And then we lose the queen. Yeah. It's cool. And you can see why I would be tempted to take a draw. Obviously, I would play this out against a person. But, you know, it's very likely to end in a draw. Or a 50 move repetition. Not a repetition. 50 move rule. Anyway, that is the basic technique. This is what's important to know, this one. Otherwise, just look for forks. You know, humans are way more likely to fall to complicated forks. If you see like a series of checks here that ends in a fork or something, humans are way more likely to fall for that. But these bots are just perfect, you know. And I don't know how they do it, to be honest. But anyway, I hope I explained those pretty well. I hope you go ahead and practice these for yourself. Because to be honest, they are quite fun. Once you get into them, they are quite fun. I think it's beautiful how the pieces like coordinate with each other. And see how they end up delivering a very fancy checkmate. But anyway, I hope you all learned something. I hope you all enjoyed. Please like if you liked. Please subscribe if you really liked. And I'll catch you guys all tomorrow. Bye-bye.